Olympus Corporation was once one of Japan's most respected multinational companies, known worldwide for its cameras and medical technology. But behind its global success was a secret hidden for nearly 2 decades. In 2011, investigators uncovered one of the biggest corporate scandals in Japanese history. Billions of dollars in investment losses had been concealed through fraudulent financial transactions and false financial reporting.
For nearly 100 years, the name Olympus stood for absolute German precision, engineering, and unshakable Japanese corporation's honor. They capture our world through the lens of the world-class cameras and save life through the pioneering medical technology. But behind the clear, polished glass of their Tokyo headquarters lay a dark multi-billion-dollar secret and a secret buried so deep it took 2 decades and an outsider to tear it wide open. Tonight, we pull back the curtain of one of the most audacious corporate conspiracies in modern history. A staggering $1.7 billion accounting fraud that has been sent shockwave through the global financial markets. For nearly 20 years, the truth was systematically suffocated and shredded, hidden in plain sight. But the house of cards began to collapse the moment Olympus did the unthinkable. They appointed their very first Western Chief Executive Officer, and his name is Michael Woodford. And what he uncovered wasn't just creative accounting. It was a criminal cover-up of catastrophic proportions. And how did a global titan blindside the international regulators for 20 years? And how far was the board willing to go to keep him quiet? The investigation begins right now.
After becoming CEO, Woodford reviewed several corporate transactions involving unusually high advisory payments and questionable acquisitions.
Why did Olympus pay such enormous advisory fees for these acquisitions?
The transactions were approved internally.
But the figures don't make commercial sense.
According to the investigator, the scandal dates back to the 1980s when the Olympus experienced financial difficulties due to the sharp appreciation of the Japanese yen. To generate additional profit, the company established a special financial asset management unit under the supervision of Hideo Yamada. Initially, the investment strategy known as Zaitaku produced substantial returns. However, in the 1990s, this investment had generated losses approaching 100 billion. Instead of reporting the losses to the shareholders and regulators, executives allegedly continued making increasingly risky investment in an attempt to recover the money. When accounting regulations later required companies to disclose the true market value of their assets, Olympus executives feared the losses would be exposed. The investigators believe Olympus used a Tobashi scheme, transferring poor-performing investment to offshore shell companies, including the entities based in the Cayman Islands. This allowed the company to keep the losses hidden from its financial statements while maintaining the appearance of financial stability. Investigators also discovered a series of questionable acquisitions involving unusually large advisory fees. One of the most significant transactions involved the acquisition of Gyrus Group, where Olympus paid advisory fees worth hundreds of millions of dollars. These payments were recorded as a goodwill, making the transactions appear legitimate while allegedly being used to conceal earlier investment. Michael Woodford became Olympus' first foreign chief executive officer (CEO) after reviewing the company records. Woodford questions the unusually high acquisition costs and advisory fees. However, only weeks after raising this concern, he was dismissed from his position. Rather than remaining silent, Woodford reported his concerns to authorities and the media. His actions exposed the alleged fraud to the public and triggered investigations in Japan, United Kingdom, and the United States. Following the extensive investigation, Japanese prosecutors charged former chairman Tsuyoshi Kikukawa, Hideo Yamada, Hisashi Mori, and several consultants with criminal offenses relating to accounting fraud and falsification of financial statements. Olympus Corporation itself was also fined for fraudulent accounting practices. The court later concluded that the misconduct was not simply an accounting error, but a deliberate scheme designed to conceal entailed losses and misled shareholders.
All rise.
My lord, investigation reveals that Olympus Corporation concealed investment losses amounting to approximately 1.7 billion US dollars. The company engaged in suspicious acquisition and paid excessive advisory fees to hide previous financial losses. My lord, the evidence before this court demonstrates a deliberate and long-running scheme by senior executives of Olympus Corporation to conceal massive investment losses from shareholders, regulators, and the public. The facts reveal that the misconduct originated in the 1990s when speculative investment undertaken by Olympus resulted in losses amounting to approximately 100 billion yen. Rather than disclosing these losses as required by law and accounting standards, Hideo Yamada and Hisashi Mori chose to conceal them through a series of deceptive transactions. The court attention is drawn to the implementation of a Tobashi scheme, whereby loss-making investments were transferred to offshore shell companies, including entities incorporated in the Cayman Islands. Through this arrangement, Olympus was able to remove substantial losses from its balance sheet and present a misleading picture of its financial health. Furthermore, the evidence shows that Olympus engaged in suspicious merger and acquisition transactions to further disguise these losses. The company paid excessive advisory fees and acquired companies at highly inflated prices, most notably in its acquisition of Gyrus Group. These payments were subsequently recorded as goodwill, creating the false impression that they represented a legitimate business investment, when in reality, they were being used to conceal prior investment losses. My lord, this action constitutes fraudulent financial reporting. As a publicly listed company, Olympus had a duty to provide accurate and transparent financial information to its shareholders and the investing public. Instead, the company concealed approximately 1.7 billion USD in losses over a period of nearly 20 years. As a result, shareholders, investors, creditors, and regulators were deprived of actual information concerning the company's true financial position. The financial statement submitted by Olympus contained material misrepresentation and failed to reflect the actual condition of the company.
The defense counsel rose, offering a firm denial while challenging the allegations presented before the court.
In addition, the conduct of Hideo Yamada and Hisashi Mori amounted to a breach of their fiduciary duties as corporate officers. Directors and senior executives are expected to act honestly, in good faith, and in the best interest of the company. However, instead of protecting the interests of Olympus and its stakeholders, they prioritize concealing their mistake and protecting their reputation. Their actions ultimately transformed a financial loss into a corporate fraud that continued for almost 2 decades. The court should also take consideration the treatment of Michael Woodford, who was appointed as Chief Executive Officer of Olympus and subsequently discovered several suspicious transactions involving excessive acquisition payment and advisory fees. Rather than investigation the concerns raised by Mr. Woodford, Olympus removed him from his position shortly after to question these transactions. This dismissal illustrates a failure of corporate accountability and demonstrates retaliation against an individual attempting to expose misconduct within the company. Such action undermine transparency and discourage employees from reporting wrongdoing. My lord, the evidence clearly established a pattern of deliberate deception, false financial reporting, breach of fiduciary duties, and suppression of legitimate concerns. These were not isolated mistakes or accounting errors, rather they form part of a systematic effort to conceal the true financial position of Olympus Corporation for many years.
Presented before this court reveals serious misconduct involving fraud, concealment of losses, breach of fiduciary duties, and failure of corporate governance. Such action undermine public confidence in corporate institutions and financial reporting systems. This court will now proceed to recommend the appropriate legal actions and recommendations.
Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution has informed the court that the evidence reveals a serious and sustained pattern of wrongdoing involving senior officials of Olympus Corporation. According to the case presented, the company suffered massive investment losses beginning in the 1990s. Instead of reporting these losses honestly, senior executives allegedly concealed them through complex financial arrangements over many years. The court was told that offshore structures were used to move loss-making assets out of the company accounts, creating a false impression that Olympus was financially stable. In addition, questionable mergers and acquisitions were allegedly carried out, with inflated payments and advisory fees being recorded in a way that disguised earlier losses. The prosecution argues that these actions amounted to fraudulent financial reporting and further alleged that this conduct misled shareholders, investors, and regulators for over 2 decades, involving losses estimated at around $1.7 billion USD. The court also heard concerns regarding corporate governance, including the treatment of whistleblower Michael Woodford, who was reportedly removed after raising questions about this transaction. In summary, the prosecution position is that this was not simple accounting error, but a deliberate and prolonged effort to misrepresent the true financial condition of the company.
After the investigation, the court delivers its findings.
Having reviewed the evidence and findings presented before this court, it is clear that serious corporate misconduct was committed by Olympus Corporation and several corporate officers. The concealment of financial losses, manipulation of financial statements, and abuse of corporate authority constitute grave breaches of corporate governance principles. The action of the directors not only violated their fiduciary duties, but also undermined investor confidence and public trust in corporate institutions. Having carefully considered the evidence presented before this court, including the findings of the investigation and submissions made by the counsel, this court is satisfied that the misconduct committed by the executives of Olympus Corporation was not merely an accounting mistake or an error in judgment. The evidence clearly demonstrates a deliberate and systematic scheme to conceal investment losses amounting to approximately $1.7 billion over a period of nearly 2 decades. The court finds that Mr. Hideo Yamada and Mr. Hisashi Mori knowingly participated in the implementation of the Tobashi scheme, transferring loss-making investment to offshore shells company and manipulating merger and acquisition transactions in order to conceal the true financial position of Olympus Corporation. Such conduct strikes at the very foundation of corporate transparency and investors' confidence. As a public listed company, Olympus had a legal duty to provide accurate and complete financial disclosure to its shareholders, investors, creditors, and regulators. Instead, false and misleading financial statements were submitted, depriving stakeholders of the information necessary to make informed decisions. Accordingly, this court recommends that criminal charges be pursued against all corporate officers responsible for the fraudulent financial reporting and concealment of losses. The court further recommends that substantial fines and terms of imprisonment be imposed where appropriate, in order to reflect the seriousness of the misconduct and to serve as a deterrent against future corporate frauds. In addition, this court recommends that the executive found responsible for these fraudulent activities be disqualified from serving as directors, officers, or managers of any listed company. Individuals who deliberately abuse their position of trust should not be permitted to hold positions that require honesty, integrity, and accountability. The court now turns to the issue of fiduciary duties. The evidence established that the executive failed to act in the best interest of Olympus Corporation. Rather than disclosing the losses and taking corrective action, they choose to conceal the truth in order to protect their own position and reputation. As a direct consequence of their action, Olympus suffered severe reputational damage, a significant decline in share value, increased legal expense, and a loss of investor confidence. Therefore, this court recommends that Olympus Corporation and its shareholder continue pursuing civil actions against the former executive for breach of fiduciary duties and seek recovery of all losses caused by their misconduct. Those who have caused harm to the company through fraudulent conduct should be held personally accountable for the damages suffered. Finally, the court addressed the treatment of Mr. Michael Woodford. The evidence reveals that Mr. Woodford, upon discovering suspicious acquisition and excessive advisory payment, raised legitimate concerns regarding the company's financial practice, rather than investigate those concerns. Olympus chose to dismiss him from his position. This court considers such retaliation against a whistleblower to be inconsistent with the principle of accountability, transparency, and good corporate governance. Whistleblower performs an essential role in exposing corporate misconduct before greater harm can occur. For this reason, regulatory authorities should impose appropriate sanctions against individuals responsible for retaliatory actions and ensure stronger protection for whistleblowers in the future. The court further recommends comprehensive corporate governance reform, including stronger audit committees, greater board independence, periodic compliance review, effective whistleblowing mechanism, and independent investigation into allegations of wrongdoing. Only through transparency, accountability, and strong corporate governance can public confidence in corporation and financial reporting system be restored. This case serves as a reminder that no corporation, regardless of its size or reputation, is above the law. Judgment delivered.
Following the real-world trial, the former chairman Tsuyoshi Kikukawa and executives Hideo Yamada and Hisashi Mori were handed suspended prison sentences, and Olympus Corporation was fined 700 million yen. Michael Woodford was vindicated, becoming a global symbol for corporate whistleblowing.